Arun, for that recap and introduction of today. And now we have Ravi Gururaj here next up. And Ravi is a good friend of ours. He is probably the most connected person I know in Bangalore. He's president of TIE. He's on the executive council at NASSCOM. He was my co-host for a couple of years at NPC. He runs a company, QuickPod, that does lockers for companies around the country. And again, another great all-around good guy, Ravi Gururaj.
Good morning, Jaspreet. Can you hear us? Do we have his audio?
Can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can. So fantastic. Good. We are all connected. So this morning, we have Jaspreet Singh, founder and CEO of Druva. And I'm going to have Jaspreet tell us a little bit about the Druva story. Yesterday, we had Girish from Freshworks kick us off. Very resilient, driven entrepreneur in the SaaS space. Today we have an outstanding example of a similar outstanding, resilient entrepreneur in the enterprise cloud space. So welcome, Jaspreet, to NPC. Thank you for coming to us a little late in the night for you, I guess. And we hope next time you'll be here in person as well, right? So Jaspreet, I wanted to start off by just having you tell us a little bit about where you started off. You were in Pune working with a couple of large companies. You then spun out of there to create what was an enterprise or actually a PC backup solution, right? So, and then tell us a little bit about how you pivoted, from that into a cloud backup solution. And then, the story of going from kind of Pune to the US, right? So if you could spend a couple of minutes just to give people background on your journey, and then we can get into more of the scaling and the other questions we have.
Sounds good. Absolutely. So thank you all for having me here. The Druva journey started off almost now about 9 to 10 years old. The initial thought process actually was more around disaster recovery. That's what the name Druva. We were trying to build a long-distance replication disaster recovery solution for the Asian banking industry, which was facing a SOX compliance for risk mitigation back then. We could, coming out of Veritas, build a world-class solution, but very quickly realized that people don't buy cars from Argentina, which means they were not looking for buying a high-risk mitigation disaster recovery solution from unfunded part of India. When I tried to raise money, that was a great time to raise money if you're a cafe coffee day or a PVR, but not for there was no money for a product company, enterprise product company, at least back then. So hence we pivoted. We realized this is a very heavy sales cycle, enterprise cycle thought process. So can we pivot to something which is a little bit more enterprise can try and buy over a web. We scaled down the problem because of lack of funding, lack of enterprise action.
So just before you get to the pivot from a kind of PC backup to enterprise, how long was the journey there? How long did it take you to come to that realization? And what did you finally say, okay, now we've got to go into a new area, right? What kind of decision making?
It took us 1 year of soul searching to realize disaster recovery won't cut it. I was spending too much time on the road trying to sell something. We had customers. The first customer was PepsiCo. Second was, I think, Hindustan Lever or Hindustan, I forgot which company. But within 1 year, we realized this was a high velocity model. So after 1 year, we came to PC backup, underserved market. Spent 2 years there with a similar IP, similar concept. This time we changed the model from road warrior to web-based selling, web-based download and buy. Started seeing enterprise adoption. And then we raised money from Sequoia Capital 2 years out, 2011. I went to the Valley and then realized that one more pivot is coming. It's really got to be number one in your space. You've got to try and build what you're doing on the software as a cloud offering. So 2012, after raising Series A, we again pivoted. It was a very, very painful pivot to say no to about 100 customers and say, sorry, we are again pivoting to a cloud-based model. That really took off. We got our first customer in 2013 March, and this year we have about 4,000 customers about 5 years later. So
Fantastic.
really took off the last 5 years.
And just so the audience has kind of a set of metrics, Jaspreet, you raised how many million total now from 2011 to 2018?
In the last 7 years, we've raised about $200 million.
200 million, okay. And how many, you said 4,000 customers. You've
4,000.
got employees both in Pune and in the Valley, right?
Pune Valley, two main offices, then we have small other sales offices here and there.
Sure, fantastic. So, tell us a little bit about, what it's taken you to kind of, the path to success in the Valley, right? Your engineering is still quite predominantly out of Pune. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
The reason I personally moved to the Valley when Sequoia funded, in fact, it's part of Sequoia's funding thesis to say, product companies have to build global, especially in enterprise space, so you have to be in the Valley. And the idea was to find the relevant go-to-market enterprise talent pool in the Valley you can use for go-to-market, mostly sales, marketing, and also productization. How do you build products which are very much high-end enterprise ready? So that was the reason to move here. We kept our predominantly engineering in India, kept predominantly a sales, marketing, product motion in the Valley, and it kind of worked. We went from serving mid-market customers to heavy in enterprise customers, which was really, the product was unique and successful to sort of move to the Valley in that area.
So Jaspreet, we have in the audience founders who are building enterprise products, SaaS products, right? And maybe going through a similar decision cycle in terms of, do I build an MVP product out of India? Especially the enterprise ones that are doing feet on the street kind of sales in the US. What guidance do you have for them? In terms of what does it take to get out there? What would be a good kind of set of metrics to say, okay, when this happens, this is the tipping point, I have to do this, right? And how much capital do you need to have in hand before you approach the US with physical kind of team there?
Great question. So I think the first question is, do you really have to go to the US? And that answer lies in the product market fit. Are you building something horizontal which will be consumed by large enterprise globally? Are you building something verticalized like you're building for Indian banking, or building something verticalized that's very likely regionalized, right? If you build for banking, if you build for pharma, there's a very regional specific K-12 or education. You're building very regional specific products. Retail is very regional. So if you're building a very vertical specific solution, very likely you should focus on certain verticals and certain regions and stick to it. You're building a horizontal product, which is scales across enterprises. The US is a great market given the concentration of Fortune 2000 enterprises in a single country, same language. So if you decide that your product needs to be the US to scale enterprise-wide, then I think it's a question of, can you sustain the pivot? You have enough cash in the bank. How are you going to generate leads? How do you close deals? Are you dependent upon a web-based lead generation? Are you depending upon field-based lead generation or selling? So it depends on all those criteria. Druva had no choice. We had literally no money. We had just about $3 million from Sequoia Capital. So we built a very heavy web-based engine to make sure we have sales reps continuously fed, moved to US, hired a small sales team there, and then slowly and organically grew from there. The market traction was strong. There are wings to sort of take us. So it depends on all those criteria of how robust is the go-to-market engine, how much it can sustain, what kind of products we have.
Got it. So Jaspreet, you've been a consummate salesman in the Valley now, in some sense, not just building a product, not just building a company, but ultimately you have to build that pipeline, right, of customers. So, tell us a little bit about, okay, if somebody's planning to build a sales team there, what are some of the learnings you've had over the last 4 or 5 years, right, in what it takes to build a team, especially for a founder who, is kind of jetting in from India, setting up for the first time there, right? What are the challenges and kind of things you should watch out for?
So, great question again. So, when I moved here, I was trying to figure out, is there a model I can replicate or follow? Is there a close enough proximity model I can learn from? And what I found was the Israel-US model is fairly proven. It's pretty established how Israeli founders come to the US and how they set up, and the first sales rep and the second sales rep and the marketing and finance. So I got someone very seasoned Israeli entrepreneur funded by Sequoia before on the board, took his advice to understand what do you need to do. Unfortunately, fortunately, I had to understand how to build teams multiple times because build a different team early on, different team in the mid stage, different team in the late stage. So that's a whole learning curve. Ultimately, you look for people in stage, early stage, look for people who can wear multiple hats, who are hungry, driven, are more generalist, can operate in white space, can solve open-ended problems. As you go later stage, you're hiring for people who are very specialists, who know one thing and one thing very, very well, who scale large companies, can sort of pull you through, must be very much on the experience, then see you through. So initially, you're hiring for more about hunger, drive, passion, uh, common DNA, connection. Later on, you're hiring for more process, more scale, more velocity. Obviously, hunger-driven passion still needs to be there, but the scale and process gives an way for early stage of entrepreneurship and skunk works.
Got it. Now so that's the selling to the customer now. You've also done very successfully selling to the investor, right? So tell us how you get them past no initially, then, to saying yes to big, large slugs of cash, right? That you need to grow out the company. What are tips there, especially in the early stage, let's say, the Series B, after you kind of move to the US, right?
I think it's a market of one. If you as an entrepreneur, you when I say market of one, as in you just need one guy to say yes. As an entrepreneur, you got to have a thick skin. I think money ultimately is commodity, right? There's hardly any skill set being a VC. There's a lot of skill set being an entrepreneur, right? If you remember that particular uh, form of thinking, I think the best you can do is put your head down and execute. Someone will notice your great amount of work, uh, and then a good partner or a good VC firm is likely to pay attention and take notice and come involved. So there's hardly any point trying to chase different VCs. There's only a very very few good ones out there, and the only way you attract them is just good numbers, good metrics, good business model.
Got it. And then, what are the team dynamics as you go through from that seed to, switching products to switching to the US? How did you think through the team? I know you said you had 3 different teams for different stages of the company, but, the core team that is building product, how did you keep them together? How do they remain involved and morale high, right, throughout that process?
So the India engineering team, fortunate to have some really, really awesome engineers in our India team. I think for them, and still today, the big driver to join Druva was the immediate market impact. If you're an engineer who wants to work for an enterprise tech company, and most often than not, you are part of a hierarchy where the product managers driving down decisions from US to India. We kept the hierarchy pretty simple and straightforward, and most engineers could see their impact on the customer's journey, and were extremely passionate about working in Druva and having impact. But we still retain some of the top talent we hired about 8 to 9 years ago. We have those people intact with the company. In the US, I think you have to look for both cultural match. Ultimately, building a team. You're not hiring the best individuals. You're building a strong team. They come to exec teams. So a strong cultural match, a strong passion for common goals, and then people have to have the right time in the right space, right? So as I said, early stage you're looking for people who are entrepreneurial, can change multiple hats. Late stage you're looking for people who are a little bit more skill set oriented and deal oriented. So with those things, I think I had personally had to agree, not for anything else, but because of my own learning. I was learning as an entrepreneur myself. I had to learn how to build a team, assemble, disassemble. It's equally important to assemble a great team than to think back, peel back, and think, what do I need to upgrade, change, how do I build? Both parts are very important. I had to, unfortunately, or fortunately, given my lack of learning, I had to do it multiple times.
Got it. So now I have a personal question for you. I know you juggle many balls. You've got teams on two different continents, 12 hours apart. Tell us a little bit about how you manage to keep your own personal productivity, efficiency high, right? I know every time if you've been in town in Silicon Valley when we brought our delegations out, you've always obliged to come out and chat with the entrepreneurs. So how do you manage time? How do you make sure you're in touch with everything going on in the company? Any tips for founders that sometimes might feel overwhelmed, right, with all of these balls in the air?
Good question. I can give experience of what I do. I'm not sure it's the best thing to do. What I typically try to do is every Sunday night or almost every beginning of the week, end of the day, sometime when you find time, do a complete brain dump of things in your head. Just write down strategic, critical, time critical, important things, and just power through as many as you can. I rarely spend my day checking emails. I think it's sometimes distracting. I do it before 8 a.m. or after 7 p.m. And most of the day, get my majority of things done. That's getting my work done and my agenda done. Then there's part of team coaching and team ability. That people need to see you, feel you, you need to be involved with the company. So I think of three kind of impact I can have. I can have a casual conversation, tell me more about yourself. I can give a nudge to someone saying, think about this way. I can think of a discussion or a directive saying, let's come and discuss and debate it, decide something. In these three core forums, I try to see how many lives I can touch every single day. During lunch meetings, during breakfast discussions, during evening hours. So between my critical work done, so I have three buckets, as I said, my critical work done, as many lives I can touch in these three forums, and then eventually getting my emails at the end of the day done.
Great. So Jaspreet, we'll try and take a couple of questions from the audience. I might have to repeat the question in case, if there's any questions, please raise your hand and we can get a mic to you. But before, as the mics are getting out there, if you're in the cloud business, you're defining kind of enterprise back up into the cloud, that whole space. Where do you see that going in the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself and Druva 5 or even 10 years out, right? In terms of that specific sector.
So I think if you track these three mega trends, the first mega trend 30 years, 40 years ago was software, then came internet, now is cloud. These are, 15, 20-year long trends from the inception to peak and then to sort of stagnation, right? I think we are in the early infancy of cloud. It's still taking on. We don't see cloud technology innovation. We see cloud as more software-defined data center technology. We see cloud as a business advantage. So it's we're a very, very early infancy of cloud. From when it pertains to storage or backup or data management, there are a couple of very, very solid trends which are driving Druva's growth or any anybody else's growth. That is one, obviously, fundamental, the business ability to drive more cloud adoption in the enterprise. Second is the nature of data is changing dramatically. You have a lot of enterprise apps. Now you have a lot of sensor, image, text data driven from IoT, human-created data, machine-created data. Third is the enterprise need and desire to analyze content. So what we're seeing is a change in data, which will change the shape of likes of data. Think about data more holistically, more far-reaching of enterprise besides just the data center. At the same time, it's not only going to be about backups, it's about how do you ingest data, and how do you analyze the data to provide any insight on enterprise to get their work done in a much more meaningful way. So more about data management, data protection, the years to come. So it's going to be probably a critical next 4 or 5 years to redefine this $30 billion market, and hopefully we are pretty confident we have a good role in that.
Great. So, if there are any questions in the audience, if there are not, they were a little slow starting here, early morning, 9:30. Let me ask you one last question, in terms of the technology space. AI, ML, all the new deep technologies that have been enabled with, increased compute being available, even at the edge and the core, right? How does that impact your business going forward? I know you mentioned data analytics, people wanting to analyze data, but are there other things you're seeing, that you're seeing 5 years out in this space that will be, highly differentiated, right?
Absolutely. So I think what's happening when we view the world, machine learning or AI, which is a subset of machine learning, they're both getting increasingly accessible and over time commoditized. The basics of machine learning is getting much more accessible than much before. Right? It used to be only a few privileged enterprise to be able to deploy ML-based solution. Now it's getting accessible by a broad set of market. So what we believe machine learning will have an impact is what mobile had back in 2013, 14, right? Everything had to be mobilized, more accessible. The similar would be what in Druva we call AI of things. How machine learning will simplify, have a broad impact by simplifying those, in Druva's context, simplifying those simple concepts of automation, analysis of data, right? So how do you make sure the solution deploy are autonomous, self-healing, self-deploying, can reduce the burden on enterprise, are much more smarter. Being smarter won't be a differentiator, will be a natural progression for most people, including Druva. And then how do you apply machine learning to get to the deeper depths of data and analyze it? The needle in haystack problem. So we see broad adoptions of AI. And I think AI is going to be a lot more accessible. It will be classic that everything would be smarter 3-4 years down the line. And AI will play a big role, just like mobile did 5 years ago.
Great. So Jaspreet, just in closing, we've only got a minute left. Any kind of insights you want to share with entrepreneurs in the enterprise space, right? In terms of what it might take to be to get to success, to get past those early milestones.
I think focus very hard on product market fit. Make sure you can hear that sucking sound in the market for your solution. That's extremely important. It's very important to spend the time on the right problems. So finding the right product market fit, which can apply to the market, and being insanely driven to make sure you find it and you keep on reviving and perfecting it over the years. That's probably one. Second is enterprise selling. Getting the team who could be passionate about that problem statement is hard. Sometimes raising money on enterprise problem is harder, especially in India. Persistence plays a very important role. Once you know you've found something and you can hear the sucking sound in the market, you got to be really driven to, passionate to give time and energy to sort of keep on driving, and you can really stick in the world. Just two thoughts.
Great. So thank you, Jaspreet, for somebody who's found both fit and is resilient. We thank you for joining us today. Look forward to welcoming you to other NASSCOM events in the future. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Big round for Jaspreet.